Her daughter-in-law smiled across the table. "We'll handle your pension from now on," she said, like a favor. Maggie Howard, retired principal and widow, didn't argue. Caleb, her only son, nodded as if they'd solved her life. By sunrise, one account would vanish, another would bloom, and the power they thought they claimed would already be gone. She'd spent decades teaching responsibility. Now the lesson was theirs. "We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." It was just after Sunday lunch, the kind of meal that used to feel like a ritual. Roast chicken, steamed green beans, the kids complaining about the lack of fries. But now it felt prepared, like something they'd all rehearsed. Caleb cleared the dishes with almost theatrical cheer while Amber wiped down the already clean table. I sat there, coffee in hand, half listening to them chat about school board elections and parking lot repaving like we were any other suburban family. Then Amber slid the manila folder across the table, smooth as a closing statement. "These are just some updated pension management forms," she said, too brightly. "Figured it's easier if we help take care of this now." I looked at the folder. It had my name typed across the front in bold font, like I was the client of some firm I hadn't hired. I didn't open it. Caleb was already moving back to the table. He pulled out a chair, sat opposite me, and added, "It's just simpler if we handle it, Mom." I blinked. Simpler? Yeah, just automatic transfers, less for you to think about, Amber said, brushing invisible lint from her sweater. "We'll keep your grocery budget separate. You'll still have your allowance for day-to-day stuff." Allowance? I couldn't help the laugh that slipped out. It was short, breathy, and definitely not amused. I looked from one earnest face to the other. These were my children. I had raised them. I'd managed our finances when their father's construction firm hit bankruptcy. I'd worked night shifts, done taxes by hand, talked bill collectors into patience. And now I was being handed a folder labeled like a retirement home intake form. I met Caleb's eyes. "Is this a request or a decision?" He hesitated just long enough for me to know. Amber's smile faltered. "We just want to make sure everything's structured." I tapped the folder once with my finger, then pushed it gently back toward them. "I appreciate your concern." No yelling, no scene. I just stood up and took my empty cup to the sink. The scrape of the chair legs behind me was the only sound. That night, long after their car pulled out of the driveway, I sat at the kitchen table in my robe with a glass of water and Laura on speakerphone. "They think I'm a dependent again," I said, folding the dish towel just to keep my hands busy. On the other end, Laura exhaled sharply. "God, Amber always was the little CFO, huh?" They probably rehearsed it. Honestly, they looked proud of themselves. Laura snorted. "They're managing you like you're an investment property. Next comes the talk about assisted living." "I'm not signing anything," I said, staring at the folder now sitting in the trash bin under some crumpled napkins. "Then don't," she said simply. "You've always taught best through demonstration. Show them what independent actually looks like." I nodded even though she couldn't see it. There was a long pause before Laura asked, "You still thinking about going back to the old house?" "I'm more than thinking about it." She sighed. "Maggie, that place needs work." "So do I." From upstairs, I heard the creak of the hallway floorboards. The twins were probably asleep, but the sound made me feel like I had a choice to make. Now, not later. I hung up and padded quietly to the front closet. From the shelf above the coats, I pulled down a box I hadn't touched in years. The keys were still there. House keys, the safety deposit box, the old storage unit in Somerville. I closed my hand around the cold metal and just stood there, heart beating like a teenager about to sneak out for the first time. Then I heard a different sound, one that didn't belong. A slow, deliberate knock at the front door. 3 firm raps. At 11:47 p.m., I froze. Who the hell knocks at that hour? The knock never came again. I stood there in the hallway for nearly a minute, waiting for a second round. Some voice. Anything. Nothing. Just the refrigerator humming and the heater clicking on in the basement. By the time I opened the door, there was only wind. No note. No car in sight. But that knock, it hadn't been a prank. It had purpose. And for some reason, it settled something in me. That night, I didn't sleep. I made tea, turned on every kitchen light, and pulled out the accordion folder I'd kept buried under the cedar planks in the closet floor. It smelled faintly of mothballs and thyme. Inside, statements, old pay stubs, retirement letters, copies of policies my children didn't know existed. Every number was there because I'd put it there. 2 pensions. A joint account I'd never closed after Ray passed. His name still on the checks. His last deposit still sitting untouched. And stocks. Modest ones, but steady. Dividend reinvestment. Slow and patient. Like I'd been taught. I laid it all out on the kitchen table, separating them into stacks with clipped labels. Something in me had switched, like an old muscle waking up. The woman I was before motherhood, before grief, before Caleb and Amber started treating me like their unpaid dependent. I hadn't disappeared. She'd just been patient. By sunrise, I was already on the phone with Laura. "I'm moving one of the pensions into a trust," I said, sipping from a lukewarm mug. "Good," she said. "We'll keep it in your name, but make it private. Their names won't show up anywhere unless you want them to." "And I don't." Laura paused. "I gotta say, Mags, you're moving like a chess player." I looked out the window. The morning was soft and gray. "They're playing checkers." She let out a laugh that sounded more like pride than amusement. "We'll do it in stages. Make it clean. I already know which pension I'm leaving in place. The smaller one. Let them see it. Let them think that's all there is." I could almost hear Laura nodding. "You're baiting a trap." "No," I said. "I'm just building a better fence." After the call, I spent the next hour sorting files, scanning what needed scanning, locking the originals back in the fireproof box I'd kept since '92. There was satisfaction in the weight of paper, the order of it all, the quiet competence that had defined my life before everyone assumed I was fading. By late afternoon, I was in the kitchen again, this time dusted in flour. Banana walnut muffins, Amber's favorite. I mashed the bananas with the back of a fork, slow and methodical. The smell brought back an old memory. Amber at 6, legs dangling from the counter, licking batter off the spoon. She came by that evening to check in. "How are you feeling, Mom?" she asked, placing her tote down like a nurse on rounds. "I'm fine," I said, sliding the muffin tray out of the oven. Her face lit up, just slightly. "Are those banana? Thought you might like some. You always used to love these?" Amber smiled, and I handed her one in a warm napkin. She bit into it, sighed. "These are amazing. You know, I was just telling Caleb we should be baking with the girls more." I smiled back. You always did love the process more than the result." She tilted her head, What do you mean? I shrugged, taking a sip of water. You used to bake half a cake just to frost it. No plan, just activity. She blinked. The compliment didn't land the way she expected. I saw it pass across her face like a shadow behind glass. We chatted about school photos and Halloween costumes. She was warm, attentive, and I matched every ounce of it, kind for kind. But inside, I was drywalling over every open hallway. I would not be explained, reduced, or processed, and I would not be handled. Later that night, with the house quiet again, I went back to the drawer and slipped the small pension summary into a place where Caleb would accidentally find it if he came nosing around again. I left a sticky note on top. Need help with this? The bait was perfect. Then I opened my laptop and booked a one-way rental van for Friday morning. Somerville storage unit, old house keys, 30 years of boxed-up tools and unspoken plans. And just as I hit confirm, my email pinged. A single new message, no subject. I clicked it. No body text, just a photo attachment. Of my old front porch, taken that morning, from the outside. I didn't check the email again. I didn't need to. Whoever sent the photo had meant it as a warning, but I took it as permission. Let them watch. The next morning, I found Amber already parked out front, minivan angled like she was staking out a crime scene. She came in with a tote, laptop, and the kind of smile that said, "Let's keep this nice." By noon, Caleb had joined. Emma and Chloe were upstairs with coloring books and the baby monitor. Amber had even brought snacks to keep them occupied. That's how I knew this wasn't a visit. It was a presentation. We sat around the dining table, the same one Ray had refinished the year Caleb was born. Amber opened her laptop with the same gravitas she used to open SAT score envelopes. "So," she said brightly, "we thought it might be helpful to get everything streamlined. Nothing major, just something to make budgeting easier." She turned the screen toward me. Color-coded columns, pie charts, expense projections. There was even a row labeled Mom, Personal Needs, with a placeholder budget of $212 a month. "We'll track your monthly needs," she continued, like a pharmaceutical rep. "Just to avoid surprises. We don't want mistakes." Mistakes. Caleb leaned forward. "It's not about control, Mom. We just don't want you worrying about bills. That's all." I looked at both of them. My grown children. Educated, confident, smiling in that same polite way Amber used on bank tellers and waitresses who got her coffee order wrong. I set my coffee cup down, slow and deliberate. "That's kind," I said. "But I stopped worrying about bills in 1998, after Ray died." Amber blinked, her smile stiffening like fabric left out in the sun too long. "Well," she said carefully, "we just want structure." I nodded, gently tapping the edge of the table with one finger. "So do banks," I said, "and I prefer mine." There was a silence then, clean and absolute. Not tense, not dramatic, just clarifying. Caleb shifted. "Mom, it's not like that." "How is it like then?" I asked, still perfectly calm. "Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like you've both mistaken me for an estate in pre-liquidation." Amber opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, knuckles whitening. "We love you," Caleb said finally. "We just don't want anything falling through the cracks." "Then stop treating me like one." Amber stood up abruptly. "Okay. I think we're all getting a little emotional." I stayed seated. "I'm not emotional, I'm amused." That landed. They exchanged a glance like kids caught out of their depth, and I watched it click for Caleb. The awareness that I wasn't resisting out of fear, but out of competence. Amber gathered her things without saying much. "We'll leave these with you," she said, motioning to a printed packet she placed on the buffet. "Just something to look over." I didn't touch it. They left without hugging me. The front door shut quietly, the way someone closes a file they're not ready to delete but can't fully trust anymore. I stood there in the silence afterward, listening to the house settle, the way it always does after company leaves. Walls relaxing, corners exhaling. Then I felt a tug at my sleeve. Emma. She looked up at me with that open-eyed solemnity only children can pull off. "Grandma, are you mad?" I crouched down to her level and smoothed a bit of jelly from her chin. "No, sweetheart, I'm amused." She didn't quite understand, but she smiled anyway and wrapped her arms around my neck. That night, I pulled out my own spreadsheets. Quiet, private, black and white. Just numbers. I'd built something real while they were still learning decimals. I had no plans to prove anything to them, but I would remind them. I checked the rental van confirmation again. Pick up in 2 days. Enough time to drive to Somerville, dig out what I needed. But something had been bothering me since the email. The photo, whoever took it, had been standing on the sidewalk. Meaning they hadn't crossed the property line. Meaning they knew the rules. And people who know rules usually have a reason. So I opened the photo one more time. This time, I zoomed in. Reflected in the storm door glass. Just barely. A sliver of a vehicle's front bumper. Chrome, curved. And on the license plate frame, in blurred but unmistakable text, Somerville Bank and Trust. I was at the bank when the branch doors opened. Not the big corporate one Amber liked with sleek glass walls and piped-in piano music, but the old stone building on Maple where Ray and I opened our first joint account in 1983. The manager still remembered me by name. "Still sharp as ever," he said when I slid the documents across the desk. "Want to move it all?" "Everything but the decoy," I said. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask. By 9:12 a.m., the visible joint account was closed. The funds quietly dispersed into private channels, each routed with the precision of someone who'd had to manage lean years without safety nets. I didn't need to check the balances. I'd already memorized them. By 10:40, Caleb's text came in. "Mom, did you touch the joint account?" I didn't answer. At 11:03, the phone rang. Amber. Her voice wasn't sweet this time. It was tight. Controlled. The same tone she used when she caught one of the girls cutting their own hair. "You froze the account?" she asked flatly. "I closed it," I said, stepping out into the sun. There was a pause. "You didn't even tell us?" "You said you wanted to simplify things," I said, unlocking my car door. "I'm simplifying." "Maggie. Mom. Caleb's mortgage bounced this morning. He had it linked to that account for autodraft." "What were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking," I said mildly. "I thought you were handling it." Another pause. I could picture her blinking rapidly, somewhere between a headache and a full spiral. "You didn't have to do it like this," she said. I didn't have to do it at all. I ended the call before she could reply. By noon, I was back at Laura's, sitting on her screened-in porch with 2 mugs of chamomile tea and a tin of shortbread she'd been hoarding for special occasions. She listened to the whole thing with her mouth slightly open, then burst out laughing, loud enough to startle the cat off her lap. "You're brutal," she said, wheezing a little. "Just practical," I said, stirring my tea. "They wanted control. Now they have none." Laura raised her mug in salute. "Lesson 1, delivered." "I'm not doing it to be petty," I said, though a part of me wasn't entirely innocent. "I know," she said. You're doing it to be clear. The truth was, it wasn't even about the money. It was about the assumption, this quiet, creeping narrative that I was something to be managed, that after a certain age, competence becomes optional, that if I didn't assert it, they'd take it as gone. Let them stumble a bit. Let them feel what absence looks like. Laura leaned back in her chair, watching the wind shift through the trees. So what's next? I pick up the rental van tomorrow. You want help? No, I said. This one I need to do alone. We sipped in silence for a while, the kind of silence that comes easy between people who've seen each other fail and survive anyway. A quiet smile crept onto my face as I stared at the horizon. One move down, more to come. But then my phone buzzed again. A new email. No sender listed, no subject line. Just a message. We saw you at the bank. Attached was another photo. Me, outside the Maple Street branch, car keys in hand, taken from across the street. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the email's photo had vanished from my inbox. No trace, no sender, no log, just gone. I didn't mention it to Laura, not yet. Some things gain power when spoken aloud, and I wasn't ready to give this particular thing a name. Instead, I focused on the day's mission: move the second pension, the real one, the one they didn't know existed. I met Laura at her kitchen table at 8 sharp. Her coffee smelled like burnt sugar and purpose. She already had the laptop open, 2 different banking tabs split across the screen. All right, she said, typing quickly. School district pension stays visible. That's the decoy. We'll file the paperwork to make the union pension the primary in the trust. Quietly. No alert sent to the beneficiaries list. Good? I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Laura clicked through the forms, her nails tapping softly on the keyboard. It's almost funny, she said. You worked 20 years for that union and never mentioned this account to them? Not once. She grinned. You're a legend, Mags. The invisible woman with perfect timing. Outside, her dog barked at nothing. Somewhere in the distance, a garbage truck clanged and hissed. The world was still moving as if I hadn't just changed my entire financial existence in under 30 minutes. When the final confirmation page loaded, Laura turned the laptop so I could read it. Transfer complete. Primary beneficiary, private trust. Status. Locked. She looked up. It's done. I exhaled slowly. Let's keep this invisible. Laura nodded. Of course. Meanwhile, in another part of town, my children were having a very different kind of morning. Amber's text came through around noon, a photo of a spreadsheet followed by, Mom, your pension payments look smaller than I expected. Is this right? I let the phone buzz against the countertop until it stopped. Then came another. She can't live on that, Caleb. Apparently, she'd meant to send that one to her brother. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. I could picture them perfectly. Amber in her office, eyes narrowing at her color-coded cells. Caleb at his desk, pulling up bank apps and scratching the back of his neck like Ray used to when something didn't add up. Laura and I, meanwhile, were at the cafe across from City Hall. We sat by the window, steam fogging the glass as she slid a paper across to me. The signed confirmation of the transfer into the trust. 5 times the school district amount, she said. No digital footprint they'll find without a court order. Perfect, I murmured. She smirked. You're smiling like a cat that just stole the roast. Not yet, I said, but soon. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Caleb. I answered, mostly to let him hear how calm I sounded. Mom, he said without preamble, Amber and I were talking, and we might need to sell your car to help cover some expenses until the budget stabilizes. Just temporary. I nearly laughed out loud. The Subaru? I asked. Yeah, you barely drive it anymore. It's just sitting in the driveway. I took a sip of my coffee. That's true. He sounded relieved. Good. I'll start the paperwork on my end. Don't bother, I said lightly. I already signed the title over this morning. A pause. To who? Emma. The silence on the line was delicious. You… what? He finally managed. She'll need it one day, I said. She's 16 next spring. I'd rather it stay in the family. Mom, come on, this isn't funny. I'm not joking. He started to say something else, but I ended the call before he could. Laura was grinning when I looked up. You really did that? Of course. She laughed, shaking her head. They'll find out too late. Perfect. Outside, the afternoon light turned the cafe windows amber and gold. The town felt smaller than usual, like a set piece in a play I'd already rehearsed. I had outmaneuvered them. Cleanly, quietly, every move precise. But as I drove home, that sense of victory began to cool. The closer I got, the more something felt off. The porch light was on, though I hadn't left it that way. The curtains in the front room were drawn slightly apart, like someone had been looking out. And when I stepped inside, there was an envelope waiting on the floor, slid just under the doorframe. No postage, no name. Inside was a single photograph. Not of me this time. Of Laura. At her kitchen table. Taken from outside the window. The next morning, I woke to a text alert from the bank. Not one of mine. Not the private trust or the safe account Laura helped me set up. This was from the simplified card Amber had insisted I keep for ease of use. Spending limit updated, $150 a week. Underneath, a message from Amber. Just a small change for security reasons. Love you. I stared at it for a moment, coffee untouched. Security. There was no mistaking it now. They were circling the wagons, pulling whatever strings they still believed they had. Amber must have seen the pension totals, connected the dots, and panicked. Caleb's mortgage bounce hadn't helped. But what they didn't understand, what they never quite grasped, was that by the time someone tries to restrict you, the work's already done. I didn't respond to the text. I left the card sitting on the kitchen counter like a forgotten coupon. Then I logged into the private account and placed 2 quiet online orders. A new winter coat. Wool, double-stitched, deep navy. Not flashy, but tailored. Mine had been 10 years old, worn at the elbows. This one made me feel like I'd stepped back into the version of myself I used to be. A woman with a spine and a calendar, not a cautionary tale. And a new laptop. Simple, clean. No fingerprint recognition. No cloud backups. I'd had enough of being watched. By Thursday afternoon, both packages had arrived. Emma helped me carry them in. She watched as I ran my fingers along the sleeve of the coat, then lifted it up in front of the hallway mirror. Wow, she said. You look like a judge. I smiled. I'll take that. I wore it to dinner that weekend. Amber noticed it before I even had my napkin unfolded. New coat? She asked, trying to sound casual. I said, adjusting the collar. Where'd you get it? Coupons. Caleb looked up from his salad. Those must have been really good coupons. I just smiled and took another bite. There were rules to this kind of thing. You don't flaunt. You don't defend. You float. And float I did. Right through the rest of dinner. Amber didn't mention the spending limit. Neither did I. After the dishes were cleared, I stepped outside to the porch. The wind had picked up, and the late October air bit at the edge of my sleeves. Laura pulled up not long after. She brought her travel mug and leaned on the railing beside me. "You look expensive," she said. "Just warm," I replied. She squinted at the coat. "And calm. Like someone who's winning without gloating." I glanced over. "I don't gloat, I glide," Laura snorted. "You're terrifyingly calm." "Grace," I said, "is the prettiest armor." She nodded, sipping her tea. "They'll never know what hit them until they're looking at the receipts." "They already are," I said. "They just can't admit it yet." The porch light buzzed above us. A moth flung itself against it again and again, determined to reach something that would burn it. I'd spent most of my adult life trying to stay small for the sake of someone else's comfort. That phase was over. Still, I hadn't told Laura about the photo. Not the second one. Not yet. But I thought about it all the time. The angle of the camera, the exact way her hand was frozen mid-gesture, as if caught in some private truth she didn't know was being witnessed. Someone wasn't just watching me anymore. They were watching us, and that meant they knew we were working together. That night, before bed, I slipped the printed photo of Laura into an envelope and slid it under the floorboards beside my fireproof box. I didn't sleep. Instead, I made a list. Names, dates, banks. And one question, underlined in red ink: who would want Laura scared, but not hurt? The knock came again. Same time, same rhythm. 3 raps. But this time, when I opened the door, there was a single sheet of paper, taped to the glass. Just one line. "Ask her about the 1997 arbitration." Amber's house always smelled like a catalog. Candles in every room. Throw pillows matched to the season. The faint aroma of lavender and lemon pledged into submission. She greeted me at the door like a politician. Arms out, eyes bright. Already angling her body so the guests could see how warmly she treated me. "There she is," she beamed. "Mom, everyone's dying to see you." I smiled. That's what was expected. Inside, the dining room was full. Neighbors, friends from her book club, one of Caleb's coworkers and his wife. Wine glasses clinked, and soft jazz spilled from the Bluetooth speaker tucked behind a floral centerpiece too large to see across. I took my seat, second from the head of the table, the symbolic spot. Important, but not central. Amber fluttered in and out of the room like a well-dressed hummingbird. She brought out wine, plates, compliments. "She's been staying with us more and more," Amber announced to no one in particular as she refilled a guest's glass. "We just want her comfortable, you know?" "Oh, that's so generous of you," someone murmured. Amber leaned in, conspiratorial and coy. "We even manage her pension now." That got some eyebrows. I heard it. All of it. The words weren't cruel. They were coded in kindness. That's what made them more dangerous. A soft sort of erasure, disguised as care. I looked across the table at Laura, who was sipping something white and dry, her face unreadable. She hadn't touched her phone all night. But now, just as Amber raised her voice again, "We just want her to feel secure, you know?" I felt the buzz in my lap. I pulled my phone under the tablecloth. A single text from Laura. "You're about to drop the hammer, aren't you?" I glanced up. She didn't look at me, just took another sip, slow and silent. I tapped back. "Not yet. Good lessons need timing." Laura's mouth twitched. Barely, but I caught it. Amber was still talking. "And we've simplified everything. Bills, groceries, even her prescriptions. I swear it's like she finally gets to rest." The table nodded, murmured again. "People love that story." the good child doing the right thing, the elder tucked in gently, folded into structure. I raised my glass. Yes, I said, smiling. They're very hands-on. A few guests chuckled, but Amber beamed like I'd just endorsed her campaign. I sipped the wine. Cheap, but drinkable. Caleb, 2 seats down, was distracted, flipping his phone face down every few minutes. He was sweating a little. He hadn't told Amber about the bounced mortgage yet. I could tell. I kept smiling. I didn't bring up the spending limit, or the car, or the pension they didn't know existed. Not tonight. Let the illusion hold. Let the false version of this family, the curated, brag-worthy, postable one, have its final supper. Across the table, Emma caught my eye. She was quietly cutting her chicken, her hair tucked behind one ear. Watching, always watching. I gave her the smallest wink. She didn't react, just kept cutting. Amber returned to the room with a lemon tart she hadn't baked, pretending she had. "This is Mom's favorite," she declared, slicing carefully. "She always had such a sweet tooth." I nodded, reaching for a fork. "Still do." Laura's text came again. One last message for the night. "You're a better actress than I thought." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because the best performances aren't about deception. They're about control. And I was in complete control. As dessert was passed and the conversation shifted to traffic and school levies, I clinked glasses with the woman next to me. "Here's to family," I said. She smiled. "You're lucky, having them close." I looked at Amber, who was explaining the importance of setting parental boundaries to a woman who didn't ask. "I am?" I said softly. Then my phone buzzed again. Not a text, an email. Subject line: arbitration file request, confidential sender, Somerville HR archive. I opened it. One line: access granted, file expires in 48 hours, and beneath it, a download link. The 1997 arbitration, the thing Laura never told me about. It started with a drawer slam. Not loud, not violent, just purposeful. Like someone determined not to break something but willing to bend it. I was upstairs, folding towels. Neutral activity. Just enough movement to keep the body busy while the mind listened. Amber was in the study. I'd left my laptop on the kitchen table, unattended on purpose. It was the old one, the one that didn't matter anymore. But it still had the login portal for the pension site bookmarked, a trap I'd set weeks ago. I heard her clicking. Once, then again. Faster. Then her voice. Low and clipped. "Incorrect credentials?" I smiled into the linen. It took her less than 3 minutes to pick up her phone. She made the call in her most professional tone. "Hi, yes. I'm calling on behalf of my mother, Margaret Lillian Howard. I'm her daughter and primary caregiver, and I'm trying to access her pension management portal, but—" She paused. My fingers slowed, but I didn't stop folding. "No, I don't have power of attorney. We usually just log in through her. Yes, but the account used to—" "Wait, what do you mean it's been transferred?" Silence. Then, "A trust?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No, I don't have that name. Can you give me the— Hello?" The line had gone dead. She slammed the phone down harder than the drawer. By then I was on the landing, just close enough to hear without being seen. A beat passed. Then Caleb's voice floated up from the living room. "Everything okay?" "She's hiding money," Amber snapped. "Who?" "Who do you think?" she said, voice rising. "Mom. She moved the whole pension. It's not even in her name anymore. It's buried in a trust under some shell account. You can't even see it." There was a pause. Thick. Waited. Then Caleb again. Quieter. "It's her pension, Amber." "Not if we're the ones covering her bills." she hissed. Not if she's living under our roof and using our health insurance and our gas and our damn grocery card. That money should be part of the family budget. The family budget. It settled over me like a fog. Caleb muttered something I couldn't catch. Amber wasn't done. She's been playing us. That stupid $212 line item in the spreadsheet? She let us believe that was everything. More silence. Then Amber, again. She's not just being stubborn, she's being strategic. Yes, exactly. From my spot at the top of the stairs, I didn't move. I didn't breathe too loud, just listened. Because this was what I'd been waiting for. Not the confrontation, but the recognition. They'd finally stopped underestimating me. I pulled out my phone and typed slowly. To Laura. Lesson 2. Exposure. She replied within seconds. They're cracking. Be still. Downstairs, I heard the shuffle of movement. A sigh. The sound of ice cubes hitting glass. Look, Caleb said, calmer now. Let's just talk to her. No more guessing. No more peeking into her stuff. She's not a project, Amber. She's Mom. You don't get it, she said. You didn't handle the taxes. You didn't take her to the doctor. You didn't sit on the phone with Blue Cross for 3 hours trying to get her glucose meter approved. Maybe not, Caleb said. But I also didn't put her on an allowance. That stopped her. I turned, walked back toward the guest room, towel still in hand. I didn't need to hear anymore. The gap between them had started to show. All I had to do now was let it widen. That evening, I sat in my room with the door locked. Laura called, voice hushed but giddy. Amber called me. She what? She asked if I knew anything about the trust. And what did you say? I said I didn't ask about my friend's finances. Because I wasn't 12. I laughed, just once. Laura paused. You haven't opened the arbitration file yet, have you? I didn't answer. She waited. Not yet, I said finally. But I will. Laura's voice dropped. It's old. You might not like it. That's why it's called a file, I said. Not a memory. After we hung up, I opened my laptop. The download link still worked. I hovered over it, finger poised. And then the lights flickered. Just once. Then again. Then everything went dark. The lights snapped back on at 2:14 a.m. Too late for coincidence. Too early for comfort. I didn't open the file that night. Whatever the arbitration held, it would wait. There was something more immediate waiting on my doorstep. Something watching. But Laura didn't wait. By noon the next day, she'd filed the paperwork. Fast, clean, airtight. A name transfer. An asset conversion. And just like that, with a signature and a notarized copy of a forgotten share certificate from 2004, I became co-owner of Howard & Wells Mortgage Services. Ray's legacy, Caleb's current employer, Amber's direct payroll processor. The irony was exquisite. Ray had invested in the company back when it was just a local lending group. I'd tucked the shares away after he died, untouched, unmentioned. I figured they'd dissolve or turn to dust. They didn't. They grew. And when the founding partner passed last year, Laura, executor of the estate, had options. She used one. By Wednesday, the paperwork was finalized. Amber didn't know. Not yet. She found out Thursday morning when her payroll stub listed a new entity, HWH Consolidated Holdings. She called HR. They confirmed the change. She asked for a breakdown. They emailed her a PDF with the updated ownership structure. My name was on it. I made sure the font matched hers exactly. I arrived at Amber's office around 10:15 a.m., unannounced. Reception let me through. Nobody stops someone in a tailored coat with confidence in her stride. She looked up as I entered, phone halfway to her ear. Her face drained of color so fast I thought for a moment she might actually faint. "Mom," she said. Not a greeting, a warning. "Relax," I said, closing the door gently behind me. "I'm not here to make a scene." Her eyes darted to the glass walls. People were watching. Of course they were. The same people who heard her say, just days ago, that she handled everything for me. "I assume you saw the paperwork?" I asked. I I didn't know Dad still. "He didn't," I said. "I did." I set my purse down neatly on the corner of her desk and leaned in, voice low. "You said you handled my pension," I said softly. "Turns out, I handle your paycheck." Her throat worked to swallow something invisible. Her lips parted, then closed again. "I never meant—" I held up a hand. "Don't explain," I said. "Smile." She blinked. "Why?" she whispered. "Because people are watching," I said. "And it would be a shame for your staff to see your dependent mother walk in and rattle your spine." She smiled, or tried to. It trembled at the edges, but it was there. I picked up my purse, walked to the door. Before leaving, I turned back once more. "You're not being punished, Amber," I said. "You're being educated." I left her with that. Out in the parking lot, Laura was waiting in her car, passenger door open. "How'd it go?" she asked, biting the rim of her coffee lid. She took it like a woman who just realized the checkbook bites back. "You could have dropped the mic," Laura said. "I prefer to drop the curtain." We drove away in silence for a few blocks. Just enough time to exhale. But as we pulled up to a stoplight, my phone buzzed again. Not a message, a calendar alert, set by me, 12 years ago. Arbitration file review, October 27th, 2025. The day Ray died, the day Laura held my hand in the hospital. And now, the day I'd finally opened the file. Amber didn't speak to me for 3 days. Not a text. Not a sigh. Not even a corrected grocery list left on the counter with her usual clipped penmanship. Her absence wasn't loud. It was clinical. Like a locked door in a familiar house. You still move past it, but the hallway feels colder. Caleb tried. The day after the office visit, he came into the kitchen under the pretense of checking the thermostat, then stayed for a half cup of coffee he didn't drink. "I think she just needs time," he said, avoiding my eyes. "I gave her 32 years, I said. "She can spare 3 days of silence." He chuckled, but the sound felt half-formed, like he was still waiting for someone else to tell him what to do. "I didn't know about the company shares," he added after a pause. "Neither did she." He nodded slowly. "She's not used to surprises. She's not used to people telling her no." He didn't argue. Before he left, he reached out like he might hug me, then changed his mind and gave my shoulder a soft squeeze instead. Progress, in its own quiet way. The house settled back into a strange, polite rhythm. I cooked my own meals. I took walks alone. Amber's SUV was gone more often than not. When it was home, she kept the doors closed and the music loud, but Emma noticed. She always did. One afternoon, I found her in the dining room with a stack of construction paper and a quiet sense of purpose. She didn't look up when I walked in, just kept drawing. When she finished, she held up 3 pictures. One was a woman in a cape, gray hair, red boots. One was a castle with a thick wall and a watchtower made of gold. The last was a tree, its roots reaching into a river shaped like a $sign. "You're my hero," she said softly. I crouched beside her, touched her wrist. "Sweetheart, heroes are just patient teachers." She didn't blink. "You're both." I kissed the top of her head and didn't correct her. That night, I opened a new tab on my laptop and made the first anonymous donation to her school's literacy fund, a substantial one, enough to buy new tablets for every fourth grader. 3 days later, I made another. The day after that, I bought a year's worth of school lunches for every kid on the reduced plan. No one knew the name behind it. Just a routing number from a private trust that no one could trace, not even Amber. It felt cleaner than revenge, more durable. Laura called later that week. She didn't ask about Amber or Caleb. She didn't ask if I'd opened the file. She just said, "You're reinvesting pain into purpose." "And it compounds beautifully," I said. She went quiet for a beat. "You always did play the long game, Mags." "Not a game," I said. "A legacy." Outside, the wind had shifted. October was giving way to November, and the cold came with more certainty now, less bluff, more bite. You could feel winter gathering its thoughts. The house was too quiet that night. I walked the halls like a woman waiting for something to arrive or return. A part of me missed the noise, even if it was tension wrapped in civility. But there was also peace in it, control. Silence can be a punishment or a reward. Sometimes both. I sat at my desk and opened the arbitration file at last. It loaded slowly. 57 pages. Typed. Dated. Every detail chronicled with chilling precision. I read the first line, then the second, then stopped. I closed the laptop. Not from fear, from choice. Because I knew, now, exactly how this story needed to end. But not tonight. Tonight was for stillness. Tomorrow would bring the storm. It happened in the garden, not in the kitchen, where I expected it. Not in a hallway. Not at night, when tempers like to rehearse their anger in silence. No. She waited until late morning, when the light was sharp, and the birds had gone quiet. When I was on my knees pulling weeds, wearing gloves that had once belonged to her father. "I need to talk to you," Amber said. I didn't turn. She waited. 5 seconds. Maybe 6. Then louder. "Now." I stood slowly, brushing soil from my palms. She looked composed in that brittle way people do when they're trying to contain too much. Beige slacks. Blouse too white for garden dirt. The wind moved through her like she wasn't quite attached to the earth anymore. "You wanted privacy," I said. "You've had it." She stepped closer. Her jaw was tight. "Why humiliate me like that?" I didn't flinch. "I didn't humiliate you. You walked into my office. You made a show. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't name names." "You smiled while you gutted me," she snapped. I took off the gloves and folded them carefully. "No, Amber. You did that. When you called generosity ownership. When you mistook help for control, that wasn't my mistake. You've ruined everything I built." "No," I said, finally meeting her eyes. "I reminded you it wasn't yours to build alone." She exhaled, short, sharp, the way someone does when they're trying not to cry and failing. "You'll regret this," she said. "Doubtful," I replied. "I do my math." Behind her, the screen door creaked. Caleb stepped out, half-dressed for the day, coffee mug in hand, hair still damp. He didn't move toward us, just stood there watching. Amber noticed. "You just gonna stand there?" she snapped. He didn't answer. "I'm the one who took her to her appointments," she hissed. "I'm the one who filled her pill case, who caught her when she fell." "You filled the case once," I said quietly. "In July. After I stood for 4 hours in line at the DMV transferring your insurance into my name, so I could get your rate lowered." She blinked. "And I didn't fall. I crouched. To tie Emma's shoe." Caleb finally spoke. I didn't know about the rate change. You weren't meant to, I said. It wasn't a gift. It was a correction. Amber shook her head, stepping back. You're twisting everything. No, I said. I'm finishing it. She turned toward Caleb. Say something. He looked down into his mug, then back at me. Why didn't you just tell us? Because you weren't asking, I said. You were assigning. Silence again. Heavy. Absolute. I wasn't trying to take anything from you, Amber said. I believed her. That was the worst part. She hadn't meant to become the very thing she hated. She'd simply let fear dress itself up as planning. I took a step toward her. You loved me as long as I was grateful. The second I asked for privacy, you called it rebellion. Caleb shifted again, uncomfortable. We were just trying to make things easier. Easier for who? I asked. You chose silence, Caleb. Silence is expensive. You're paying for it now. I picked up the gloves and turned back to the garden bed. I'm not angry with either of you, I added. But I am done pretending to be impressed by your spreadsheets. Behind me, the screen door creaked again. I didn't turn to see who followed me inside. Amber stayed in the yard for a long time, long enough for the wind to rise, long enough for the neighbors to notice, long enough, I hoped, for the silence to start teaching her something. That night, I poured tea into the mug Ray used to favor. It still had the chip along the rim, the one I used to threaten to throw out but never did. I opened the file again, scrolled to page 3, and that's when I saw it. A name I hadn't expected. Laura's. Not as a witness, as a petitioner. It started with whispers. First from the checkout clerk at Lyman's, who suddenly paused before asking if I needed help to the car. Then from Sheila Hendricks, who left a pie on my porch with a note that said nothing about pie, only thinking of you. By the end of the week, the whispers had voices. Amber, it seemed, had been busy. According to the version floating between driveways and school pickup lines, I had moved money behind the family's back, cut off the kids financially, and used my dead husband's trust to embarrass them. No word, of course, about the spreadsheets. No mention of the allowance. Just enough truth to make the lie feel earned. Laura called on Friday afternoon. I could tell by the way she said Mags that she already knew. She's talking. I know. She's not saying everything. She doesn't have to, I said. That's the benefit of suggestion. People fill in what hurts them most. Laura paused. You want me to say something? No, I said. Truth doesn't need speed. She exhaled into the phone. Still, doesn't mean it should sit in traffic forever. I smiled. I'm working on it. I didn't call Amber. I didn't correct the neighbors. But I did make a few calls of my own. To the community center, to the school board, to a local catering company I trusted. One email at a time, I shaped the morning into something else. By Sunday, the flyers were out. Community Appreciation Brunch, hosted by the Howard Family Foundation. Location, McHenry Hall. Purpose, celebrating quiet service, with new scholarships announced in honor of Ray Howard. I didn't ask anyone to come. But they came anyway. McHenry Hall hadn't been this full since the mayor's re-election party. Folding chairs scraped across tile, coffee urns hissed behind linen-covered tables, a framed photo of Ray, the one from our 20th anniversary trip to Door County, sat on a stand at the front of the room, smiling like he knew what was about to happen. Amber arrived late, face pinched behind polite makeup. Caleb followed, kids in tow. They stuck to the back row, flanked by a few of the very neighbors who'd been thinking of me all week. I stepped up to the podium without notes. Thank you for coming, I began, voice clear, calm. This morning isn't about headlines or headlines dressed up as gossip. It's about direction. And what happens when you invest in people instead of just paperwork? I gestured toward Ray's photo. My husband believed in three things: showing up, shutting up, and putting your money where it mattered. A few chuckles. One nod from a man in the front. So, I continued, the Howard Family Trust is launching 2 annual scholarships. One for graduating seniors pursuing trades. One for adult learners returning to education after age 40. Both fully funded by the pension Ray left behind. Murmurs spread. Then applause. Real, rising, unstaged. I caught Amber's face mid-clap. It was the kind of expression that doesn't quite land, somewhere between surprise and nausea. She hadn't expected that pension to be part of the speech. She hadn't expected me to beat her to the story. I smiled at her, then back at the crowd. I've made mistakes, I said plainly, but hiding wasn't one of them. Protecting is different from pretending. Another small wave of claps. Respect, not pity. Laura raised a mug of weak coffee like a toast. I gave her the smallest nod. And then, as the noise died down, I added, casually but clearly, transparency, dear, I said, looking at Amber, is the best audit. She froze, just for a second, but I saw it. And so did the room. They didn't know he was coming. That was part of it. James arrived at 9:45 a.m. in a dark wool suit, briefcase in one hand, envelope in the other. He nodded to me at the door, quiet as ever, and stepped inside like he was just another neighbor bringing banana bread. Caleb was in the living room. Amber appeared from upstairs the moment she heard his name. James McAllister? She said, confused. From Howard and Wells? Yes, James replied, polite but clipped. But today, I'm here as your mother's estate attorney. I watched Amber's posture shift, not collapse, not yet, but lean. The way a structure leans just before the damage is obvious. Caleb rose to meet him, brows furrowed. Is something wrong? James opened the case and handed over 2 folders, one labeled for each of them. These are the revised estate documents, including asset allocations, directives, and inheritance structure, he said, effective immediately, irrevocable as of this morning. Amber reached for hers like it was a subpoena. Caleb opened his slowly. The silence that followed was heavier than argument. Amber found her voice first. She changed everything without telling us. I told you more than you heard, I said quietly. Caleb turned a page, frowned. What does this mean? Conditional inheritance. James looked at me, then back at them. It means, he said evenly, that any financial disbursement tied to your mother's estate, excluding the house, which will be held in trust for the grandchildren, is now contingent on the following: completion of 1 accredited financial ethics course every calendar year, and a minimum of 100 hours of verified community service. Amber made a sharp sound in her throat, as if she'd swallowed something wrong. You're making us volunteer for our inheritance? You're not required to do anything, I said, but if you want what's left, you'll need to give first. Caleb shook his head, stunned. You mean this is punishment? No, I said, stepping closer. It's correction. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger, but I wasn't the stranger. Not really. Amber's hand trembled over the signature page. You planned this all along? No, I said, meeting her eyes. You planned it for me. I just kept the receipts. She didn't respond. Instead, her lip curled just slightly, and the first tear slipped free. Not grief, not remorse. Pride, cracking at its own weight. I didn't flinch. I let her feel it. Caleb closed his folder and set it on the table like it might explode. So we're, what? Supposed to just perform goodness now? You were already performing something, I said. This will simply redirect the spotlight. Amber wiped at her face, then stood suddenly. This is cruel. No, I said. It's structured. James packed his briefcase. You can review the documents with separate counsel, of course, but the filings are final. As of this morning, any contest will trigger a freeze of all assets for a minimum of 5 years. Amber sat back down like she'd been pushed. Caleb looked at me again, differently this time. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I know, I said. But hurt isn't about intention, it's about repetition. And both of you repeated the same mistake, assuming my silence was agreement. James slipped out quietly. The clock ticked louder in the room than it had all year. Before I turned to leave, I looked down at them once more. My children. Brilliant, burdened, bruised by their own best intentions. You thought I was becoming less, I said. But all I was doing was narrowing. I walked out the front door. Laura was in the car waiting. She didn't speak, just handed me a thermos and watched the house in the rear view. I still haven't told you what was in the arbitration, I said softly. I figured you would when you were ready. I'm ready now. I looked at her. You tried to protect Ray from a wrongful firing claim, I said. But it was my name they forged, not his. Her hands tightened around the steering wheel. I waited. I didn't know, she whispered. You should have asked. And for the first time in years, she didn't have an answer. It took 5 months. No fireworks, no breakthroughs, just time. The kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness outright but softens the ground where it might grow. I was in the backyard deadheading tulips when Caleb came through the side gate. He didn't call first, just showed up, holding a brown paper bag and looking like a man who'd practiced this moment more than once in the mirror. Brought lemon bars, he said. I nodded toward the porch swing. They belong on a plate. He followed, set the bag down, and sat. No defense in his posture. Just a kind of weathered humility I hadn't seen since he was 10 and dented the mailbox with his bike. He didn't start with excuses. He started with breath. I was wrong, he said. I waited. I let Amber lead because it was easier, he went on. Because she sounded sure. And when I finally had doubts, I didn't check them. I just went quiet. He looked at me then, really looked. And I'm sorry. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't rehearsed. That's how I knew it was real. I reached for a lemon bar, broke it clean in half. Apology accepted, I said. You'll still need to take that ethics course, of course. He grinned, sheepish, but sincere. Already enrolled, and I'm coaching Emma's robotics club now. Figured it counted toward the hours. Depends who you ask, I said, but good start. He exhaled, sat back. The tension around his shoulders eased, just slightly. She misses you, he said after a pause. Amber. I know. She's volunteering now, at the literacy center, quietly. Doesn't even put her name on the sign-in sheet. I didn't say anything. I just looked out across the yard, where the grass had started greening again. She's not perfect, he added, but I think she's trying. For Emma, if not for you. For herself, I corrected. That's the only version that sticks. He nodded. Before he left, he hugged me. Fully this time. No shoulder squeeze. No hesitation. I'll bring Emma by next week, he said. I'll make tea. True to his word, they came, and Emma, who had grown nearly an inch in spring alone, stood in the doorway holding a piece of folded paper. It was another drawing. This time, 3 women. One wore a crown made of books. One held a measuring scale. One had a tree growing out of her chest. "You're all of them now," she said, handing it to me. "Dad says you made the family smarter." I looked at Caleb. He shrugged, smiling. "She listens more than I realize." I crouched and took Emma's hand. "Grandma," she whispered. Dad smiles again. I felt something shift, not dramatic, not triumphant, just real. "Then the lesson worked," I said. That weekend, Laura and I sat on her porch again, the way we used to before everything got too complicated to name. She brought out the same tin of shortbread, same chipped mugs, but the silence between us felt different, no longer full of what wasn't said, but what had finally been understood. "I heard about the lemon bars," she said, handing me tea. "He still doesn't bake," I replied. She smiled. "Amber's asked about joining the foundation board. No decisions yet, but it's a start." I sipped, nodded. "You taught her a few things, too." "You taught 3 generations at once," Laura said. "Whether you meant to or not." "I meant to," I said. "It's what principals do." She laughed. That short, familiar breath of knowing. The wind picked up, shaking loose a few leaves not yet ready to fall. Somewhere down the street, a child shouted with glee at nothing in particular. "You ever gonna tell them about the arbitration?" Laura asked. I shook my head slowly. "They don't need that story. They just need this one." We sat there a long time, letting the quiet hold us, because peace, once earned, doesn't come crashing in. It tiptoes. The house was quiet in the way only spring mornings allow, soft light through clean windows, a breeze that didn't ask permission, and the distant sound of Emma laughing at something in the backyard. I sat at the kitchen table with a black pen and 2 thick folders, one stamped Trust in gold, the other simply labeled Legacy. The documents were all in order. Laura had seen to that. The Howard Family Foundation was now its own quiet machine, not just scholarships, but community grants, adult literacy endowments, even a small internship fund for trade school students. Every line of my pension had been redirected with purpose. What once felt like an end now read like an outline. Ray's shares in the mortgage company continued to pay forward, feeding the very business his son had grown into. Steadier now, less frantic. Even his emails had softened. I noticed. Across the kitchen, the coffee pot gurgled its last exhale. Footsteps, light ones, Amber. She said nothing at first, just reached into the cupboard for 2 mugs. Not the pretty ones for guests, but the chipped ones, the real ones. She poured quietly, added cream to mine without asking, set it down gently, then sat. Still nothing. Just the hum of spring settling into the floorboards. Then finally, "Thank you." I looked up. "For not giving up on us," she said, eyes fixed on the table. I waited a beat. "Thank yourself," I said. "For learning." She nodded, eyes glassy but firm. "I thought if I planned enough, I could protect everyone, even you." "I never needed protection," I said. "I needed space." "I see that now." Outside, Emma shrieked with delight. A bird took off from the feeder with a flutter that shook the branch. Amber smiled faintly. "She wants to build a lending library on the front lawn." "Let her." She looked at me again. "She already asked for budgeting help." "Good," I said. "Tell her to call me." Amber laughed, soft and startled. "Okay." We sipped in silence for a while. Comfortable, finally. Then she stood, pressed a kiss to my temple, and left me with the coffee and my paperwork. I turned back to the folders. Every dollar had direction now. No noise, no confusion, not a penny wasted, not a motive disguised. It was a balance sheet in every sense. Accounts reconciled, lessons paid forward. The door swung open again. Emma. She came barreling in with grass in her socks and chalk on her hands. She dropped something in my lap. A drawing, of course. This one was different. It showed a bridge, wide and strong, made of books and vines and coins and calendars. Across it walked a woman in red boots, holding a lantern. At the far end, 3 people waiting. A family. Arms open. "Is this me?" I asked. Emma giggled. "It's who you are." She ran off before I could say anything else. My phone buzzed. "Laura. Retirement complete?" I smiled, took another sip of coffee, then opened a new page in my planner. Not to schedule, not to list. Just to write something I hadn't been able to admit until now. I picked up my pen and wrote, "They said they'd handle my pension. They just didn't know I'd already mastered compound interest in self-respect." And finally, I closed the ledger. But not the story. Not yet. Because some investments, they keep growing.